I've always said or implied that you should first study drawing before you can move on to painting. But when I think about it, is it really necessary? The response to this question is crucial, especially if you're learning art on your own. And you probably heard, like me, that drawing comes first. But now I remember what an artist called Harold Speed wrote in 1873 in his book called Oil Painting Techniques and Materials. Listen to this. Instead of the student being trained first in drawing and after acquiring a certain proficiency, being allowed to start painting as if one naturally grew out of the other, I would suggest that each of the three divisions of the subject, form, tone, and color, be studied simultaneously from the start. They do not grow out of each other, but rather into each other from three different centers of perception that cover the whole ground of visual phenomena. And that's that's true actually. I guess maybe I was wrong. I didn't discover this passage of the book yesterday. I read it a while ago, but I guess I went too fast back then, or I never really took the time to think about it. And you know, the tradition in figurative art is the classical Renaissance order, first drawing, then painting. And I held that for true without questioning it too much myself, because that's actually how I started. I did start with drawing before I picked up a brush, but a lot of it has to do with practical considerations. I started with drawing as a student because I was broke and only had a pencil in a stupidly tiny room under the roofs of Paris. But if someone had dropped all the necessary painting gear, I would probably have used it early on. I always felt that it was not such a big deal for students to try painting early. I never recommended to avoid it altogether. Now that I think about it, my idea has always been that students should be able to start with whatever motivates them the most, especially if they are self-taught. And if they struggle with, shapes and proportions in their paintings, then I often recommended to practice drawing. So back to drawing, basically, back to square one. My idea in theory, following the tradition, was that drawing is the sole foundation for painting. But I have to say that in practice, Harold Speed's point makes a lot of sense, and it's much closer to what I did. There are three fundamental roots of art: form, tone, and color, and they can be studied at the same time. Now that I think about it, it's more or less how the tutorials on my channel have been divided so far, like drawing tutorials, painting tutorials focused on values, and painting tutorials focused on color. So you have like three main categories. And now that I think about it, I believe that I was just repeating the traditional mantra that drawing comes before painting, but in practice I was working on all at the same time. So do I need to reconsider everything and take back what I said previously about drawing and painting? We'll see. Let's talk about Harold Speed's point first. As said earlier, he sees three main qualities in vision. Quote, "These three qualities in vision are the three things with which the artist expresses himself, and they have each their separate expressive qualities and are each present in some degree in all pictures. Some artists will rely most on the beauty of form in their work, like Ingres, some on the beauty of tone, like Whistler, and some on the beauty of color, like Monticelli." According to Speed, form is about the outlines of objects in 2 dimensions and also the representation of volume, the 3rd dimension. Form is what makes the subject feel real, as if you can almost touch it. If I had to try to relate this idea to my channel, this would be everything drawing related, about videos about drawing with paint, blocking with paint, proportions, shadow shapes, edges, etc. Tone. So tone in Speed's book is more or less the same as what I call value. And as he explained, tone is here used to express solely the degrees of lightness or darkness, not changes of hue in the color. There are darker and lighter shades of the same color so that a color may vary in tone without being said to vary in hue. And on my channel, I do have a lot of videos on tone or values. This would be related to everything that focuses on values, like practicing in grisaille, monochromatic studies, and in a way, limited palette exercises. And finally, color is the third dimension that concerns hue and saturation, or chroma if you prefer, which is the word that I use most of the time. In my tutorial section, this would be all videos about color theory, color mixing, pigments, color harmony, etc. So there you go. Basically, Speed says that instead of just starting with drawing before you can try painting, the student can learn from the three dimensions of art more or less at the same time. The idea is great. It's that you explore one of the three fields and you realize that you have limitations from one of the two others. So next time you work on that, and so on. And you cycle through the complementary skills based on your needs. So it's not linear and you're not limiting yourself voluntarily. You're exploring a little bit of everything, and every time you struggle with something, you move your practice within this triangle. For example, you're learning tones, so values, trying to make a simplified copy of a cast with only like 3 values, and the exercise goes well, except at one point you realize that your proportions are off. So next time you might want to practice with a drawing exercise in which the objective is to have accurate proportions. But both exercises are in black and white, so after that you might want to try doing a color study, something simple, just to bring some variety. You're not there yet in terms of color, but it doesn't mean that you cannot try. However, doing this color study, you realize that you're still not there yet with values in a more complex composition, so you might want to do a value exercise next, and so on and so on. So that's how you can move around in this triangle, basically. And I really like this approach. It's not segregating drawing and painting, which is almost like, oh, okay, no, so now you're good at drawing, so now it's time to start over, so you forget everything you've learned, and you have to learn basically from scratch, learn everything again. But with this triadic approach, you're learning elements, simple elements of painting early on that will let you know what type of drawing skills you're going to need to learn if you want to paint. And I think that it's especially good for self-taught artists, because it's kind of boring and frustrating to have to forbid yourself to try painting when this is ultimately what you want to do. That's why I always tried to make tutorials on the 3 domains, form, tone, and color, so that you can practice on whatever you feel would be more beneficial at whatever point in your artistic journey. I said in the past that drawing comes before painting, and I guess that in a way, this was kind of wrong if you consider this new approach. However, there are still a lot of benefits in starting with drawing. Like I said, it's, first of all, easier to pick up, it's less constraining, and you can start with very little and make significant improvements. And it's just naturally something that you do first. So why not work on that first and just get good at it before you even start buying your painting gear? That's kind of easy to do, right? And Speed himself in his book recognizes that there is some kind of hierarchy within the 3 domains, and that form, or so drawing, has priority. Quote, "Form is by far the most important of these 3 divisions, and the one where hard study is best rewarded. There is no end to the study of form, and the fine artist is always drawing." So here he admits that form or drawing is of the utmost importance and has some sort of priority over tone and color, but he continues, "But at the same time, as you are commencing drawing, I should advise you to vary your work by occasionally having a day studying tone and then a day studying color. If the study of these are left until the eye has become hardened by a long course of severe form expression, it is more difficult to open up the development of these new perceptions, and it will be a relaxation from the more exacting task of drawing. So I really like this approach. Just take a day or two in your schedule just to get some variety. Start with drawing, but don't limit yourself to that. Don't frustrate yourself. Just allow yourself to experiment with tone and allow yourself to experiment with color occasionally. Don't push yourself too far because you're not quite there yet and drawing still has some type of priority, but you can still work on this and experiment, which is fun and it's a relaxing experience. That's cool. I really like this approach. It's great for self-teaching. How many times have I heard about teachers forbidding students to try painting because they didn't have their drawing program complete? That's boring and frustrating. It might be fine if you're in an art school, but for people learning on their own, it's discouraging and undermining. Plus, I really believe in the benefits of just trying painting early on, sort of just putting a toe in the water to get a feeling of what's ahead. I really think that if you start experimenting with painting, you will learn about your limitations in drawing, and you'll be more aware of how to conduct your teaching journey. So, was I wrong back in the days saying that drawing has to come before painting? Kind of, yes, if it led people to believe that you're now allowed to start painting before you finished mastering drawing first. But I was mostly wrong with the words that I was using, repeating, a preconceived notion that's been passed from generations since the Renaissance. The truth is that it's more complicated than that. First of all, drawing usually comes first no matter what. It's the natural thing to do is to start with drawing, so why not start with it and get good at it? Then this linear approach, drawing then painting, it can work if you have good instructions and someone to lead you there. And finally, I used to repeat this mantra, but in reality, I was always offering people varied ways to study a little bit of everything, depending on what they feel like practicing. So in the end, if you've been following my channel, there's always been a little bit of the three at the same time, since this channel has existed. So I would say that drawing comes first by default, and although it's necessary to work on drawing and accuracy in the beginning, it shouldn't mean that other forms of expression should be excluded. Far from it. I will leave it to speed. You will find as you advance in the study of each of these three subjects that they will help each other. The study of form will make it easier to get the shape of your masses right, and the study of tone will be found of inestimable value in judging color. But in your form studies, don't bother about the tone, concentrate on the form idea. And in your tone studies, don't bother unduly about the form. Select subjects where form is not of so much importance in the first instance. And in your color studies, concentrate on getting the color vitality without unduly bothering about anything else. The great thing is to learn one thing at a time, to concentrate on one particular difficulty and practice until you master it. If you want to know how I started personally, what type of exercise I did, then you can click on this video right here where I explain everything, and you can even download the resource image if you want to follow along and start today with just a simple pencil. Alright, thanks for watching, thank you to everyone supporting me on Patreon, and as always, joy and inspiration to you, my friend.